All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this month. This is our first webinar for 2025 here for the New York City chapter Products That Count. So happy New Year to everybody, and happy Lunar New Year to those celebrating here on this auspicious Wednesday. My name is Dan Hammaker. I am the head of chapter for the New York City chapter of Products That Count. I'm super excited to be restarting our webinar series here this year with a great guest, Joe Meersman, who is the managing partner or one of the managing partners at Gyroscope AI, co-founder of that organization as well. Joe brings a wealth of experience that I'll let him speak to in more detail around obviously user experience and UX best practices, but also AI software, AI products, and sort of the marriage of the two. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about what it looks like in a world of software where AI is front and center. What does that mean for our roles as product managers, our collaboration with the UX community, and where we might see a little bit of commingling of responsibility over time. So I don't want to steal any more thunder, Joe. Let me turn it over to you to provide a little bit more background on yourself and what brought you here today.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks, All Things Products That Count organization. Really happy to be here with y'all. Happy New Year. And as Dan aptly cited, Lunar New Year. Um, yeah, great to be here. Really excited about today's conversation. A little bit about me. Uh, about well, let's see here. Over 20 years of experience, split almost evenly between researcher and designer. I guess a through line through my career path has been all things emerging technology. I got my career started in human factors and ergonomics at a furniture manufacturer by the name of Herman Miller. Bounced out a couple years later to a post Razor, pre iPhone heyday of mobile technology at Motorola, where I chased Bluetooth technology and bone conduction headsets and voice menus and stuff like that. Bounced around to digital agencies for a couple of years, and then ended up as employee 12 of IBM Design and helped build the studio with a few others up to several thousand, where it's currently at today. During that period of time, I had the good fortune of being in a leadership role within the Watson organization, leading teams of designers on some of the early instantiations of all things AI, which then led me a couple of years later to be involved with Watson for Finance. And I kind of ended up kicking around the financial and legal vertical for the next few years. And let's see here. I want to say in mid Q3 of last year, hung a shingle with an organization called Gyroscope.ai, where we focus in on the delivery and definition of all things associated with intelligent automation.
Awesome. So, great background, I think, to bring to this conversation. And it's something that I'm really excited to talk about. For those of you who are new to our webinar format here at Products Account, we do a lot of fireside chats like this one. And throughout these, we welcome Q&A. So if you've got any questions throughout the chat, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A portion of the Zoom control here on the webinar. We'll also save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So know that we'll have that time to address any questions that come up for you as well. We wanted to, just as Joe and I were getting prepped for this, knock out one of the elephants in the room that comes up a lot, at least in the conversations that I'm having with product managers these days. I know a lot of people are sort of with maybe a little bit of nervousness beginning to anticipate the world of AI and some of the changes that might bring, not only for the products that they're working on, but also for the role of product management itself. You follow some folks that you might see on X or LinkedIn or others, and this notion of product management, it's dead, is I think been floated and taken hold in certain corners. And understandably, it's causing a little bit of anxiety. And I wanted to talk about that very directly here. So, um, Joe, let's dive right in. In terms of course, you're coming from the design perspective, right? And you're talking to an audience of, largely product managers here, but I think, obviously there's a lot of overlap in our communities and obviously a lot of collaboration when it comes to execution. How are you looking at the future of our R&D organizations, and what are some trends emerging for you?
For sure. I'm fortunate to have been in spaces in my career where I built both physical and digital products, right? I've shipped capital P products, I've shipped online experiences, and I've been in a lot of different kind of more engineering heavy environments throughout that path. And, for me, I think what I enjoy the most about all things product development is that you never know where a good idea is going to come from. And what I really enjoy is kind of that like Smash Brothers style melee of just the early stages of where something kind of like fuzzily undefined comes up, and we all get in and we try to, kind of think about every which way it could be delivered on. And I think the reason why I enjoy that is like there's a certain surface tension there that develops that is both anxiety inducing and really fun, in that the best ideas don't always come from the design organization, right? And I think they don't always come from, marketing or product or development. They can come from every different angle. And what I enjoy about AI is the thought of the leveling of a playing field and everyone being, I'd say, somewhat generally effective, in that if I want to learn about something or if I have an intellectual curiosity in another space, I can easily ask GPT, Claude, call any of the usual suspects how I might answer a question or how I might address something. So I think AI it can be a fantastic equalizer as long as people aren't worried about others staying in their lane.
Mhm. So I think that brings up an interesting point and kind of brings up a lot of the angles of the commentary, at least that I'm seeing, which is, you know, people are saying product management is dead because they expect a designer who has the hard skills around UX to be able to pick up PM with the help of AI. Or, they expect an engineer with the hard skills of coding to be able to pick up um, PM with the help of AI. And, part of that is also assuming that they can get more efficient and gain some time back around their core responsibilities and along those hard skills with the help of AI, right? So,
Mhm.
um, do you think that's realistic, or is that just kind of people justifying some layoffs with this projection?
Well, there's there's a myriad of different factors that go into layoffs, and the thought of being able to say that we have to run leaner and you've got to do, 30% of somebody else's job because we can't afford to backfill, that'll never go out of style, right? I'm old enough to remember the early days of user experience design, when there were probably two or three schools that actually had like a formal UX program, and then a bunch of other schools that did library sciences or like information science. And information science was largely like kind of an odd little tucked away facet of like a computer science program. And I reference this because in the early days, every job post felt like a unicorn, right? Like has to be able to do user research and wireframes and visual design and has to be able to write code. And like everyone I ran into, especially in a down economy, all saw the same job postings. So you'd kind of look at other people and wonder like who's actually getting that job? And or like, do I even want that job? Right? So it's the thought of like, I don't know who can do all those things, and or I don't know if I want to be in an environment that expects all those things, right?
Mhm.
So the philosophy that I have around it is it's emerging, but I one thing I failed to mention is I'm an adjunct at UT. So I teach on average like, I don't know, probably 100 and change students every year. I believe in minors and majors. I believe that there are certain things that I'm going to be really good at and other things that I can deliver on, but they're not my area of specialty, right? Like I think that there is a future state where there'll be an evolution of job posts that'll say, primary responsibilities are product management, secondary responsibilities are like a the ability to create user flows or create base level wireframes, right? And the reason why I say that is partially because I don't know of more than maybe one or two programs, pardon me, that are out there today where you can get a graduate degree in product management. I know you can't get an undergraduate in product management from anywhere, which tells you that it's a generalist profession, right? And that there's a certain set of skills that are required, but the answer for how you get into product management is it depends, right?
Mhm.
And as long as there's a high demand for that type of role out there, I think people are in a great position to fill that role. I think as that role kind of evolves and in different contexts, it's more specific, and in other contexts, it's less specific. So, Dan, I know when you started at Intap, it was a much small, or at Deal Cloud, it was a much smaller organization. And now where you're at Intap, it's a much larger organization and you have a different role and responsibility. But when you're at a smaller company and you're a product manager, you're wearing a lot of different hats all day long. It's all about context switching, right? If I work at a larger enterprise, I may be focused on one product or even a facet of a product, right? API experience or something along those lines, for example, not deprecating that role. Um, and that may require a set of very specific and focused skills. So I think as we decide where we go next in our careers and where we want to stay along our career path, we have to think about the types of skills that we want to grow. So essentially where we want to minor and where we want to major.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful framing of it. I think it's something a lot of folks on this call are going to be able to relate to, and I like the idea also because it kind of frees us from the idea that we need to become experts now in a bunch of new things and reboot our skill sets in some different areas. So um, I think it brings up some interesting questions too, just about like what are some maybe natural minors to look for, and how could AI potentially play a supporting role in acquiring those minors? Assuming, for a lot of us on this call, product management is going to remain our major.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, how do you kind of see that playing out, and where do you think AI is maybe well suited to supporting that minor acquisition?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm not going to tell you it depends. If on an individual basis, if you came out of school, whether or not that's undergrad or graduate, and you had a proclivity to work in a certain space like consumer, experience, right? Let's say you're really into consumer electronic products. So if you want to go down that route, then you're probably pretty keen on thinking about how things are marketed and or are positioned in the marketplace. You're probably very in tune with user research and or providing, a killer feature that's not necessarily driven by what the competition's doing, right? So because of that, your minor might be in user research or like kind of like lightweight, maybe well not lightweight, maybe either user research or service or voice design or voice experience, right? If we don't have too many buttons on the device. And then if you're really interested in the consumer space, you probably have a good strong you probably have a strong intuition around all things like marketing and or how the product's going to be positioned from an outbound perspective, right? It could be that if someone started their career in like a sales role and they said, you know what, I don't really like the smile and dialing or like the writing of emails and the campaign management and the outreach, right? What you may find is that when you get into enterprise product or product management, you don't want to go back to sales, but your minor in this case is actually you're going to work really well with the sales and marketing organizations because you understand the dynamics of the funnel and what it takes to convert a prospect. So you're going to be more sensitive to what the information that needs to be handed off to the other areas of the business are going to be. In the case of tooling, in any four of those examples, we can go through like specific tools if you want. What I'll tell you is that tools kind of come in and out like fashion. And right now, with VC funding still kind of on fumes in a lot of to one degree or another in the bootstrap software space, we're seeing a good amount of churn in the .ais and .ios that are out there.
Mhm.
Towards the end of the session, I'm happy to go rapidamente on like the different disciplines and some different tools that like I have exposure to or that I've played with.
Mhm.
What I will recommend to everyone in the virtual room today is make it easy on yourself, make it easy on your IT organization, and try to figure out where somebody like Atlassian is building extensions and or add-ons into companion products that you are already provisioned for, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
use Atlassian for an example because I know not everybody hearts Jira
Mhm.
and not everybody's in love with their Kanban boards, but everyone's going to kind of do, like hone their craft differently. And I would look at integrations into existing platforms before going shopping on like the next best hottest shit tool out there. Because trying to get procurement to pick up something like that in a larger organization, I wouldn't say it's a Sisyphean effort, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to, minor in procurement on this call. So, trying to avoid that outcome makes a lot of sense. Um, and that I think is good advice. And I think we get into these evaluations and discussions, right? And a lot of it, I think, comes down to, like you said, some of what you're naturally inclined towards. If you don't really enjoy the outbound and the push, don't try to minor in sales. You can go tackle another discipline and kind of build your more well-rounded skill set that way. I think there's, no matter what, going to be some natural push-pull with some of the existing PM responsibilities, right? Because obviously, I don't think anybody is signing up to tackle 60-hour work weeks if, that is what we're talking about here when we mean, being able to wear a couple of hats at the organization, right? So there might need to be some things that you do today as a PM that wane a little bit as you wax on your minor. Um, so are there some things that you would say just for a PM, look, this is what you bring to a table that's unique in the world of AI that you should really
Mhm.
hold on to, double down on. And then, as you're looking to support some other disciplines and spread your wings a bit, maybe you look for tools that can help you kind of take some of this other stuff off your plate.
Absolutely. So this kind of opens up an interesting topic of discussion around like the monolithic nature of our roles and how we can kind of get wrapped around the axle of our titles. I like thinking about designers through the lens of like strengths and weaknesses, because very rarely is someone the unicorn combo pack of can do a fantastic job of icons, is stellar with layout, is awesome with information architecture, puts together flawless wireframes, and is really great at building prototypes, loves user testing, and can bang out like decent CSS, right? Like designers aren't monolithic in that regard. I use that as an example to say product management, the product managers that I've worked with over the years are no more or less monolithic in that regard, right? I would say that the framing that I've used in the past is inbound versus outbound. So some product managers are really great at working with technical sellers and with the marketing teams. Other product managers are fantastic at being detail oriented and really grooming backlogs and working closely with developers and architects. Now, to get to the substance of your question, like what do I use AI for? If I'm gonna look into an adjacent space and maybe learn about it a little bit more, I want you to think about a baton handoff in your head, in that if you're going to take the baton handoff from somebody else, and let's say you're interested in marketing and you want to help them to position the next product release in a way where you're not talking about features and capabilities, but you're talking about how you're addressing user pain points, right? If you're going to take that baton from somebody else, you have to hand off one that you have. So it may be that there's someone in your organization, maybe in marketing, that's interested in product management, and you hand them the baton of you can write the requirements or have fun with the PRD, FRD, TRD, whatever the TLA is. Now, if you're not in a position where you have somebody that's interested in taking on that work or taking that baton, the job to be done for AI is what you don't want to do, right? So if you don't want to sit there and write requirements, then you can hire AI to do that job for you. You're still going to need to clean it up and or make sure that it represents the level of fidelity that you want to go out the door. I would say something like performance monitoring, right? Pano Amplitude or Spark, those all have, I think, extensions that are quite capable that add on or plug into your existing platforms, and or there are some unique AI capabilities that are coming out there. When I think about requirements gathering and writing, I think if you give the right reference material to a Claude or a GPT, it'll do an okay job. And when it comes to taking something that comes from like customer experience or like a help desk ticket or a bug and translating it into a requirement, a tool like Craftful can be used to kind of take that raw output and with the right thresholds and fine tuning can help you with that process.
Yeah, totally agree. And I started playing around with tools like Chat PRD myself.
Mhm.
People are out there working on building some tools for product managers specifically. And I know, on the design side, Figma has done a lot to invest in their AI enabled capabilities. I'm sure, kind of take those with a bag or two of salt. Uh,
I mean, like what Figma's got to worry about is something like Replit leaning in and eating its lunch. You
Hmm.
know, like there are. I'm sorry, I cut you off there. That was rude.
No, no, no. I like that's the dialogue we should be having. I think it's a good example, right? I mean, we've all just sort of moved over to Figma from one of the various Adobe products over the last whatever 3 to 5 years, and now that could be disrupted, and we're going to be moving on to something else in the next 3 to 5. Who knows?
I mean, tools are like fashion, you know, like you don't want to fall in love with it. And I remember when Figma was one of three or four different kind of similar tools that were out there, and they all did something similar, slightly different, right? Um, I think Envision's a great example of a company that did really, really well. They had an incredibly engaged community, and I think they, for various different reasons, they kind of got out product. I think the product market fit, the landscape shifted, and at the dollar amount, somebody else could come in and provide a similar service. They rode high for a while. What I miss is all the thought leadership that they did, and they did it really well. They had a very smart team of individuals, but I'm not taking the bait. And just because you said Figma doesn't mean I'm going to hang out there for too long. So I think when it comes to utilizing AI, it's tricky because right now there is no equation. There's more of a recipe out there, and it's highly subjective as to what works best for whom. I think the biggest threat that AI, specifically Gen AI, represents is us kind of getting fat and lazy and not using our brains to solve the problems that we got into our careers to solve, and we just start being overly reliant on something that has been proven to Ouroboros and just kick back the same things if it's not given the right direction.
Yeah, so I think that's a good topic to transition to because I do want to talk a little bit about what it means to be quote unquote AI enabled. I think we've sort of established here, right, that the job market of the future is going to reward people who can market their ability to wear multiple hats. And in order to do that, you're going to have to engage with AI tools that buy you some time on either your minor or your major, probably both, so that you've got some time to do both and do both effectively. Um, but I think there's a lot of questions and there's a lot to learn around what it means to actually use AI tools effectively. And we've kind of started touching on this a little bit, but I want to dig in a little bit more detail. I know, Joe, in your role today, you're actually coaching a lot of companies and their R&D organizations on how to think about applying AI and building AI features in some cases into their own applications. Are there any lessons that you'd share with the audience that stick out based on some of that recent experience or anything prior as well?
For sure. I think to me, there are a lot of organizations that are understandably and honestly concerned about the loss of workplace culture by enabling too much automation. I think that at the end of the day, AI is just a tool. It's a super, super smart tool, but it's predictive math, you know? And because we're somewhat predictable as human beings, it's easy for us to think that like it's magic, you know? Um, the way I look at it is, and I think this is an old framing that Ethan Mollick used from one of his substacks from like 18 months ago or something. And it's starting to become something that's cited just as much as the AI is not going to take your job, but the person that knows AI will. is that there is a spectrum of AI usage that's out there. And there's always going to be a level of reasonable cultural resistance because specifically generative AI doesn't give you the same answer to the same question every single time. And it's not always correct, but it is very convincing in that we can't call it lying, so we can call it hallucinating. But when I think about the spectrum of usage, the probably the most dangerous people to themselves in any organization are the people that without thought just delegate tasks to Gen AI and they make it responsible for a decision-making process that they're held accountable for.
Mhm.
And I think it's only a matter of time before the wrong person at the wrong level of power does that and it becomes an issue. I think in the center, so that's on the far end, right? You have your self automator, just somebody that, oh, thank you, it's finally here. I can do less, right? Or I can do more over here. In the center, you have what I believe Ethan and a woman by the name of Hila out of Harvard will refer to as the cyborg, right? So this is somebody that integrates their own labor with Gen AI across all of their decision making processes. By the way, I did not come up with the term cyborgs. I mean, come on. And then, to the other end of the spectrum, you have what people will refer to as centaurs, which are people that actively divide their labor between Gen AI and what they do in a targeted manner. And I think that hybrid state is likely the future of AI and enterprise. I think because it's a tool, we decide where we can utilize it and where we can find ways to like enhance our capacity. But in essence, the last thing I want to do is train the thing to replace me.
Mhm.
And I think we all intrinsically know that there's part of every job that we don't like. So I think it makes sense to start with what I don't like to do and hire it out. But what I've seen organizations struggle with is number one, not knowing what those items are. Number two, kind of overthinking it and not applying like a good crawl walk run strategy to it. It's like they forget about like the basics of you know product management in a way. And then number three, what I've seen organizations do is spend a lot of money in a very like intelligent logical manner, and they implement Gen AI, but they haven't thought about what problem they're going to solve and or why they're doing it. Like midpoint through a project, they'll look at each other and go like, why are we doing this thing again? And who's going to use this when it's done? And that's dangerous because that's like an AI vanity project. It becomes a checkbox item. It's AI for AI's sake. And what people are left with at the end of that is a very expensive POC that doesn't scale. So one thing that my partners and I at Gyroscope do is we lean in and try to figure out how someone can get the most amount of ROI out of their AI spend.
Mhm.
And it's not easy. It's emerging technology. No one really knows where it's headed. We all think we do.
Trying to project, and obviously that is a moving target in the purest sense. But I think that's sort of an interesting point there around the challenges in avoiding the AI vanity projects, right? I think everybody's had this impetus to just demonstrate some level of seriousness about AI, some level of interest and knowledge. And so everybody's getting their hands dirty, rolling up their sleeves, pick your metaphor. And I'm not saying that's not like genuine, right? I am personally very interested in it, but I find, sometimes I'm just like looking for stuff to do with it to say that doing something with it, and I think we're also sort of reaching the point where people are like, okay, that's been fun, but let's be real. This is a tool. How can I actually find a good use for this tool? And how can I sort of demonstrate actually to other people that this is indeed a good use for the tool? That's important for me, just in justifying my own time, but also, certainly if I'm building a product that is AI powered, I need to be able to justify that to my users and to my clients. Um, I'd imagine this is something that you're talking about with your clients regularly. Do you have any tips there or thoughts on like how to judge the value of AI tools?
Absolutely. And the predicament that you outlined there, you're not alone. I think that it takes a couple drinks at a happy hour for people to lower their guards and talk openly about like how they may have gotten mixed results out of the tools, and or I tried this thing because the organization really like kind of pushed us in a certain direction. But what I've seen a lot of is frustration at the leadership level that they're paying money for a subscription or a license to a tool that no one's using, right? And the reason why
Mhm,
no one's using it can be a multitude of, it can be a confluence of factors, not the least of which is no one bothered to do the enablement and the training on the tool.
mhm,
So it's not shocking it's not getting used, right? Like it's I mean, one of the biggest challenges in enterprise software going back about like 10, probably 8 to 10, maybe 10 to 12 years is shelfware, right?
mhm.
Like after, traditionally speaking, after the salespeople push the SKU or the PID, they're out the door and it's on the organization to use it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with SaaS, you can't really afford to get away with that, you
Hmm.
know? So I think what we're seeing are some fantastic players that are, I mean, you used to say born on the cloud, but now, I mean, obviously everything's born on the cloud, but I would say AI native companies are, and not only AI native companies, but companies that are going to be around a long time are really, really good at enablement materials,
Hmm.
evangelism, and or
Hmm.
making sure that users understand how to use the tools.
Hmm.
And the ones that are fantastic at it will stick around after a tool is implemented beyond just the hooking in of the data pipes and like doing a few demos.
Yeah.
So, what we've seen a lot of is well-intended spend to get people ahead of the curve, but also a lack of behavioral modeling from leadership. So, it's one thing to say, thou shall all use insert, product here. And there are so many that are like right at the tip of my tongue that I'm not going to reference. But and it's another to say, hey everybody, welcome to this month's town hall. I was using product ABC earlier this morning to organize my talking points, or I asked it to come up with an icebreaker or a joke,
Hmm.
right? That's behavioral modeling. That's at least saying, like, yes, I'm using the tool.
Hmm.
And guess what? It gave me this terrible dad pun or this awful joke, and everybody laughs. And it's like, yeah, well, I tried
Hmm.
and now on to business, right? It doesn't need to be the lead, right? And talking about one's use of AI isn't burying the lead, but it should be referenced if that's what you want to encourage other people to do.
Yeah.
And again, like when it comes to organizations that have a super lockdown data policy and or super tight procurement operations and procedures, I mean, there are plenty of companies that are building those add-ons and integrations into the larger platforms. I mean, from my perspective, you can always figure out how to run a siloed pilot if you work with IT and you tell them what you're trying to do. They can always shut it down, best way to deal with that, and I'm kind of like trying to future cast questions here. Should that fail, you can use the tools that are provided for you. You can screen cap the results and show them to someone and say, this is garbage. You've asked me to use it. I can't get it to work. I've tried to get it to work. These things over here seem like they can solve a problem for me. Can we maybe like try one of these?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, what you're talking about is essentially like we're still in an experimental phase, right? And so we're really just trying to demonstrate like some little kernel of value. This is not, hey, like we rolled this out and it saved us $10 million this year and therefore it was justified to spend, right? But we're, in more of a place of, hey, it's shown some efficacy for these use cases. We've got some people that vouch for it. Maybe there's a little bit more that we can go on, and I think that's interesting to hear. One from the perspective of as an individual thinking about, all right, like how do I justify my own time using these things? It's not setting the bar at like, can I quantify its impact in a really direct way, but can I at least learn a little bit about what it's good for and what it's not? And that's, a useful experiment. But also just contextualize. I mean, if you're building AI products, know that that's likely what your users are doing with them as well. They're judging them on that sort of experimental basis. And so, helping to find some use cases that at least provide a little glimmer of value that they can take and run with and that you can expand on together. Hopefully that's a little bit encouraging. It's encouraging for me to hear as somebody who's working on a lot of AI products that, we've got some latitude for now, at least, to, continue building out and working together with users on the value.
Yeah. I think you hit on something really important there in the nature of iteration and running kind of like your own little baby pilots, right?
Mhm.
I think experimentation is the name of the game, but I frame that through the lens of you have to apply a scientific method, in that like you have to have a goal, you have to have a hypothesis, you have to be trying to do something. Otherwise you're just kind of like messing around with a chatbot, right? And that's what it can feel like sometimes if you don't have a problem to solve or you don't have a goal in mind. And generative AI is interesting because it generates, right? It creates things out of thin air and it tries to predict what it is, you're interested in. It goes out to the internet and brings you back an averaged answer. Well,
Mhm.
that's cool. It can also like spin up crazy images with people with like two noses and seven fingers on their third left hand, like it is emerging technology. And it's really cool to be at the forefront of that, to not only see the mistakes but see how quickly it learns, right? Because it's only ever going to be as bad as it is today. It's kind of
Mhm.
shocking when you think about it. The way that I try to coach designers and collaborators to leverage AI is put yourself in the role of a curator, which may kind of sound like um I don't know, flowery language to those that are a little bit more on the hard skills side of the house. But if you take a walk with me on this one, I'm not I may ask Gen AI for a specific solution. I may ask it for an answer to a very direct problem. And I'm going to run the risk of it giving me the wrong answer and or me taking that and running with it. And AI isn't good at like truly wicked problems or problems that require a combination of data and intuition, right? It's good at problems informed by data, and or it's really good at like scrubbing areas that are somewhat solvable with like math, for instance, even though sometimes it gets math wrong. But I use it to curate ideas and concepts, and I tend to use it as, personally for me, it gets me over the like white page syndrome if I'm writing a
Mhm.
blog post, right? Or if I'm thinking about like a thought leadership piece, I may use it to just like get off of that white page. And then paradoxically, other times I use it for the super tight edits. Like
Mhm.
I'm such an everyday user of Grammarly, I don't even think about it,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So in many ways, I think that there are tint shades and tones to modern AI. And I think through the lens of templates themselves being a type of automation. So I remember when Squarespace rolled out like pre-built designer templates, which were different than just like combinations and permutations of like hero image and body copy and different CTAs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And at the time I was working in a design agency, and there were people that were just like aghast, like, oh my God, I can't believe, anyone would use that to build their site with. And I
Yeah, yeah.
looked at it and I shrugged my shoulders and I'm like, that's what I'm building my site in, because I'm a user experience designer. I'm not fantastic at curating typography. I'm pretty good with color and layout, but like I know the people that are really good at that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to be them when I grow up. Like I know that they're fantastic at that. And this is kind of where I'm picking and choosing what I'm using. But if you look at the spectrum of all things AI, going from templates, baseline templates, all the way through like Gen AI and something like an agent that's going to make decisions on my behalf, there's a lot in between that lets me pick and choose what kind of job I want it to do. But
Mhm.
as somebody that teaches drawing, what I can tell you is I can use a circle template or a ruler to draw something that looks super nice, but I don't get better at drawing. I just get better at using those tools and like not smudging the ink while I'm doing it. I'm going to pause there because that was a little bit of a filibuster. I could take the conversation in our remaining time in the direction of all things agents. I'm happy to talk about that because I've got some thoughts along those lines. But I do want to pause in that I know, Dan, we talked with Emma about having a little bit of time for Q&A here.
Yeah, for sure. So, good reminder, we've got 10 or so minutes left. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A. But in the meantime, Dry, I would love to just pick up on a thread that I think you started to pull out there with just some of the different skills, right, that are out there that we could potentially start leveraging AI to support. And I'm curious, are there some things, at least on the design side, without, putting you in a box here, no one's going to hold you to these predictions, but 3 to 5 years out, like, are there some things that you think are core to the day-to-day of a UX designer now that are just not going to be done by a human and they're going to be tackled by AI?
I thought we led with like the elephant in the room, but apparently you found like another pachyderm and you've just like pulled it out of your pocket.
You open this box.
That's fair. That's fair. Mixed metaphors aside, I think that um being able to, as part of the design process, what we do is we explore different variations on themes, and or we think about leveraging different patterns of interaction and balance whether or not we want to bring something distinct to the table or whether or not we want to leverage something familiar. And I think as tools get better, smarter, faster, I would I would hope that somebody figures out how to integrate something that would come from like I'm trying to think of the research library. I think it's Marvin, and there are a few other tools out there that really do a great job of organizing what comes from that user research and putting it into an archive that allows me to accelerate the loop of I have a concept, I don't know, or I have like three different approaches to a solution. I don't know which one people are going to respond better to, and a way to actually look back on data that's previously been collected to give me like the probability of which solution is going to work best. And the reason
Mm,
why I say that is like a traditional AI functions in a way whereby it's so much better at the rear view and
mhm,
looking at structure, regardless of whether or not the data is structured or unstructured, to inform and predict the future. So,
mhm,
when we have enough data coming from a world model to inform context well enough in narrow cases, I think we're gonna get a lot of lift out of that.
mhm,
I do see there being a future state of smarter design language system libraries
mhm,
and being able to determine how many viable combinations and permutations are out there.
mhm,
I think that, Dan, you and I have worked with some really fantastic developers slash architects, Dima and that whole crew with Igor. I'm just name
mhm,
dropping all over the place. Nobody knows who I'm talking about. They know who I'm talking about. But we've been fortunate to work with people that know the ins and outs of a system so well that they can look at solutions and just pinpoint like that, like viable, non-viable, get out of here. Don't like, I don't know how many times I need to see that before I tell you that the system can't do that. You're
mhm,
cool, I'm out, right? Like
mhm,
there's I think a lot of value in just knowing where the thresholds of a system are. So
mhm,
I think that sort of knowledge will accelerate conversations.
mhm,
And the low level stuff that we hire AI to do is the Adobe Photoshop plugins of 5 years ago. Lorem ipsum generator, background remover,
mhm, mhm.
color palette generator. All those things are super cool. I love them. But I think the biggest performance gains out there are going to be around when we train AI well enough to know what makes sense as like a cohesive viable solution versus what only works just for like one screen, for instance.
Yeah, really, really good stuff there. Yeah, I uh think, those examples collating the UX research, obvious application of some of the summarization capabilities that are just all over the place with these large language models. And, everybody, I think, at this point has heard about the efficacy with coding, right? So just being able to throw, some concepts, see where they stand up, where they don't. Sound like some good opportunities again for that kind of branching out that we talked about earlier, supported by AI, of course. Um, I did want to take the bait and circle back to agents.
Sure.
We had a little event for our New York City chapter with a panel on agents, and part of the discussion went around the idea of the agent computer interface and the idea that we're kind of entering a new feedback loop between an end user and software that's
Hmm.
mediated by an agent now. And there's some implications on the development side in terms of how we write APIs and what sort of information we make available about sites. But there are a lot of implications around user experiences and how people engage with platforms where they've got an agent on the other side that's taking their inputs and returning some information that they go find. So, any early returns, any trends,
Oh
any
yeah.
info that you're seeing on that front that might be of interest to people?
For sure. I mean, ChatGPT, I think they overthought operator
Mm,
because I find it incredibly frustrating, and I'll probably like so frustrated with it that I'll write a blog post on it. I know. That three people will read. What bothers me about operator is I'm hiring a super smart machine to do one of the dumbest things imaginable, which is surf the internet for me. Like, are you kidding me? What I
mhm,
want is for an agent to read a web page like a flat file and extract the value that I want out of it. I don't need to see it like I don't need to see the performative, act of virtual pointer running around a website. Like it's a solution looking for a problem to solve, right?
mhm,
To
mhm,
me, that's not a true agent. It's more or less a level of agency that's being provisioned to an end user to tell the system to go do something for me. It's a very Microsoft-esque play in that it's to me really built to the to serve the purpose of making the platform stickier, right?
mhm.
What I'm probably most excited about right now is everything around Agent Force and everything Salesforce is doing. I think that the system that they've built around large action models and small action models and parameter reduction is really exciting. I think there's a lot to love there in that Salesforce is traditionally a big fan of being a platform for people to build businesses on top of, as opposed to being kind of like the traditional walled garden closed ecosystem. I think that agents are, I think to close out the conversation, agents are what businesses really want because they want clear demonstrative value from AI and they want something they can measure. They want to give it a specific job and they want it to perform. These are not the inherent qualities of generative AI.
Yeah.
Gen AI is generally applicable. It's pretty good at a lot of things. It kind of feels like magic. It can be wrong every once in a while, right? The
Mhm.
future state that will likely manifest in, I'll put on my predictor hat in the next 9 to 12 months is a hybrid environment where you have a large language model working with either a large action model, which is a custom trained LLM or SLM. Wait, no, small action model. All the TLAs, sorry. And you'll see a hybrid state of agents and LLMs and traditional automations being used in concert. What people
Yeah.
need to get over is the thought of a silver bullet solution provided by technology. It's never
Mhm.
been there. It'll never be there. We should embrace experimentation with clear KPIs and see what happens and share what works with us instead of like playing our cards really close to the chest, because that's
Yeah.
bad for our disciplines writ large.
I think that's a good place to call it. Thanks so much, Joe. Tons of insight, really, really interesting stuff, and I think a lot of useful practical tips for people to walk away with. Again, I know there is some anxiety about the world that's coming for our products, for our careers. Hopefully, you're walking away with some actionable pointers on what you can expect and what you can start doing to get ahead of the trends that aren't slowing down. If anything, only somehow continue to pick up the pace. So again, thank you so much, Joe. Would love to have you back. And for everybody who joined today, thank you as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thanks.
Cheers, y'all.